was arranging white orchids for table 12 when a dying man grabbed my wrist and whispered my father's name. A name I hadn't heard spoken out loud in 11 years. A name everyone in my life believed had burned to ash in a shipping container fire on the Brooklyn docks. I did not know that in the next 90 seconds, I would watch that same man die on the marble floor of the most powerful crime family in Manhattan, and that the man responsible would look into my eyes, go completely still, and call me by a name that was never mine to give. Rain had nothing to do with it that night. It was July, and the air over Fifth Avenue was thick and still, the kind of heat that presses against your skin like a hand. I was 26 years old, and I built floral arrangements for a living, mostly weddings, occasionally funerals, and once a year, a very specific kind of gala, thrown by very specific kind of people who paid triple my normal rate and asked no questions about the cash, the Kane Foundation charity. Gala was held on the top 3 floors of a private tower on Park Avenue, a building so exclusive it didn't have a listed address. I had been hired to build the centerpiece arrangements, 600 stems of white orchid, ranunculus, and something called Queen Anne's lace that most people don't know is a member of the carrot family. I know that because my father taught me. He taught me the Latin name of every flower before I was 10 years old, and I never once questioned why a corporate accountant would care so deeply about botany. I found out why on the night he disappeared. I had just finished my final arrangement, wiping stem sap from my fingers, when the doors at the far end of the ballroom exploded inward, not with sound at first, with silence. 200 guests in tuxedos and gowns went utterly quiet, the string quartet stumbling mid-note, as a man in a torn gray suit staggered into the room clutching his stomach, blood soaking through his fingers in a dark bloom. He fell directly into my arms. I want you to understand something about me before I go further. I have been deaf since I was 15 years old, the result of a car accident that also, according to the official record, killed my father. I do not hear sirens. I do not hear gunshots. I do not hear the men screaming for everyone to get down. What I felt instead was the vibration of 200, people's panic moving through the floor and into the soles of my feet, and the warm, spreading weight of a stranger collapsing against my chest. His lips were moving. I have read lips since the accident, out of necessity. And even through the haze of shock, I understood every syllable. Elena, your father's ledger. It's still alive. Find the man who wears white orchids on his lapel. He's the only one who can protect you now. Then his eyes rolled back and he was gone. I looked up and across the ballroom, moving through the parting crowd like the sea splitting for something ancient, was a man in a black tuxedo with a single white orchid pinned to his lapel. The exact flower I had cut myself 2 hours earlier. His name, I would learn in the next 60 seconds, was Sebastian Kane. And the empire that bore his family's name was not a foundation. It was the most feared organized crime syndicate on the eastern seaboard, and I had just watched one of his men die reciting a message meant only for me. Sebastian moved like a man who had never once in his life been surprised. And yet when his eyes landed on me, kneeling in a dead man's blood with a name on my lips that should have meant nothing to him, something in his face fractured. He crossed the room in 4 long strides, his security detail forming a wall behind him, weapons drawn beneath their jackets, and knelt directly in front of me. He did not look at the body. He looked only at me. His mouth moved slowly, deliberately, so that I could read every word with perfect clarity. Say that name again, I told him. Elena Voss. My father was Alexander Voss. Something behind his eyes went dark and reverent at once, the way a man looks when a ghost he has hunted for a decade finally steps into the light. He reached out, his knuckles brushing along my jaw with a tenderness that made no sense next to the chaos around us, and his lips formed 4 words that detonated something inside my chest. You're supposed to be dead. I did not understand. Not then that I had just walked into the center of a war that had been quietly raging since the night I supposedly died alongside my father. I did not understand that the man kneeling in front of me had spent 11 years searching for a girl he believed had perished in a car crash on the Long Island Expressway, a crash that was in fact no accident at all. Sebastian Kane did not ask me to come with him. He simply stood, extended his hand, and told his men to seal the building. Nobody leaves Table 12's florist unattended. Nobody touches her. Those exact words I read from across the room, and every armed man in that ballroom obeyed instantly. The car that took me away from that gala was a Bentley the color of wet coal, and Sebastian sat across from me in absolute silence for the first 10 minutes, simply studying my face like he was trying to solve an equation he had given up on years earlier. Finally, he reached into his jacket, produced a small leather notebook and pen, and wrote instead of speaking, since he had clearly learned somewhere that reading my lips in a moving vehicle at night would be nearly impossible. Your father was the financial architect of my organization for 15 years. He wrote, he built every account, every shell company, every route the Kane money took through Zurich. The Caymans and Singapore. Nobody else alive holds that map in their head. 11 years ago, a rival family, the Drazens, wanted that map for themselves. They tried to take him. He refused. So they arranged the crash that was supposed to kill you both. I stared at the paper for a long time before I wrote back with a shaking hand. He's alive. Sebastian's jaw tightened. He nodded once. I don't know where. But if Drazen's men just tried to kill their own courier to deliver that message to you, it means they believe you know where your father is hiding, or they believe you can access what he built without him. Either way, Elena, you are the single most valuable and most hunted person in this city tonight, and I am the only one who can keep you breathing until morning. I did not sleep that night, not in the traditional sense, though my body was folded into the guest suite of the Kane residence at the top of a building overlooking Central Park, a suite larger than my entire apartment, filled with silk bedding and floor-to-ceiling glass, and the kind of silence that only exists 40 floors above street level, because silence for me is not empty. Silence is where my other senses come alive, and beneath the physical stillness of that penthouse, I could feel everything. The tremor of Sebastian Kane pacing outside my door for hours, his footsteps a steady, anxious rhythm against the hardwood, the distant hum of a city that never fully sleeps, vibrating faintly up through steel and concrete, the particular, careful weight of someone standing very still just beyond the doorframe, watching. For 3 days, I lived inside the Kane penthouse like a piece of priceless, terrified glass. Sebastian treated me with a reverence that bordered on worship, personally overseeing every meal, sitting for hours in the corner of the sitting room simply, watching me work through arrangements of flowers he had flown in from 3 continents, as though recreating my father's greenhouse might somehow summon the man himself back from wherever he was hiding. But beneath the marble and the silk, the war outside those windows was accelerating. I could feel it in the frequency of Sebastian's absences, the increasing number of armed men rotating through the penthouse floor, the particular sharp vibration of raised voices behind closed doors that even I, without hearing a single word, understood as fury. On the 4th night, Sebastian knelt in front of me again, notebook in hand. Marcus Drazen has taken the fairer shipment at the marina. It's a trap to draw me out. But if I don't respond, he burns it and half my supply line with it. I have to go. Daniel will stay with you. He is my most trusted lieutenant. You are safe here. The building is sealed. Nobody gets in. I nodded, and he left. And for the first time in 4 days, I was alone inside that penthouse with only one other living soul, a man named Daniel, standing near the entryway with his arms crossed. What Sebastian Kane did not know, what nobody in that organization had ever bothered to ask, was what exactly my father had spent the last 3 years before his disappearance teaching me. He did not simply hand me the Latin names of flowers. He handed me the entire financial architecture of an empire, encoded inside the botanical names of 600 species, a private language between a father and a daughter that doubled as the most sophisticated ledger the Kane organization had ever possessed. And in the 2 years before the crash that took my hearing, in a gymnasium above a flower shop in Bay Ridge that I visited every Tuesday and Thursday under the guise of ballet lessons, he had also taught me exactly how to disable a man twice my size in under 4 seconds, because he always knew, somewhere in the calculating part of his mind, that one day the men he worked for would come looking for what only I could carry. Daniel's footsteps changed. The moment we were alone, slower, closer, his shoulders, when I glanced at him, had dropped their professional posture into something looser, something predatory. He crossed the room and stood directly in front of me, and when he spoke, I read every word with perfect, horrible clarity. You know, the great Sebastian Kane has spent 11 years chasing a ghost, and it turns out the ghost is just a deaf florist who doesn't know anything. Marcus is going to pay me $2 million and a piece of the West Side docks for whatever's actually in that head of yours. So why don't we skip the part where you pretend to be scared, and you just tell me where your father hid the real ledger? I let my hands tremble. I let my breath catch. I let my eyes widen with exactly the kind of fear a helpless, hunted girl should show a man twice her size closing in on her in an empty penthouse. Because Daniel had made the same mistake every man in that world had made about me since. I was 15 years old. He assumed my silence meant I was defenseless. He assumed a disability was a weakness rather than a decade of training in reading a room. Through vibration, breath, and the almost imperceptible shift of weight before a man decides to become violent. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice small. "I'm just a florist. Please don't hurt me." "That's a good girl," he said. Close enough now that I could feel the heat of his breath against my forehead. His guard completely dropped, his hand reaching for the pair of ceremonial floral shears, resting on the side table beside my chair. The very shears my father had given me on my 21st birthday. An antique pair with a blade my father had personally reforged from surgical steel. That was his final mistake. The moment his fingers closed around the shears to use them as a threat against me, I moved. My left hand shot up and drove into the nerve cluster, beneath his jaw with everything. 11 years of quiet. Disciplined training had built into my body. His head snapped back, his grip on the shears loosening for exactly the half second I needed. I twisted the antique handle from his hand, pressed the hidden release my father had built into the base, and the true blade, 6 inches of surgical steel disguised inside the ornamental floral shears, snapped free with a sound I felt rather than heard. A sharp, metallic vibration through the floorboards. I put the blade against his throat before he had even finished stumbling backward. "You want to know what my father really left behind?" I said, my voice now perfectly steady, perfectly cold. "It's not a book. It's not a file. It's inside 600 Latin names, memorized by a girl everyone decided was too broken to be dangerous. I have known men have been watching me for 11 years. I let them, because I needed exactly this moment, exactly this proof, before I ever trusted the Kane family with what I actually know." The double doors exploded open behind us at that exact moment, and Sebastian Kane stood in the frame, weapon raised, 3 of his men flooding in behind him, having realized the marina attack was a diversion designed to empty the penthouse of protection. He stopped completely still. His terrified, fragile, deaf florist was standing over his most trusted lieutenant with a blade, against his throat, her posture radiating a cold, commanding authority that had nothing fragile about it at all. "Boss," one of his men said, staring. She took him apart in about 4 seconds. Sebastian's shock melted slowly into something far more dangerous, a dark and reverent astonishment. He lowered his weapon an inch, and his lips formed words I will remember for the rest of my life. "You were never the one who needed protecting. I was never helpless," I told him, retracting the blade with a quiet click. "My father was the smartest man your family ever employed." "Did you really believe he'd leave his only daughter with nothing?" Sebastian ordered his men to take Daniel to the lower levels, to keep him alive only long enough to learn every detail of Marcus Drazen's location. And then the doors closed, and it was just the 2 of us standing in the wreckage of that shattered, glittering penthouse. He crossed the room slowly, his blood-stained hands rising to frame my face, his thumb tracing the small scar along my temple, the one the accident had left behind 11 years earlier. "You played all of us," he said, no anger in his expression at all, only a deep and burning fascination. "You just preferred believing I was the victim," I answered. "It was safer for everyone that way, including me." He kissed me then, fierce and certain, a promise sealed in blood and secrets. And somewhere beneath the floor of that penthouse, the entire architecture of a criminal empire quietly shifted, because the girl nobody saw coming had just become the only person alive who understood exactly how deep it all went. Marcus Drazen would learn by morning that the ledger he'd spent a decade hunting had been standing in a ballroom holding an orchid the whole time, and the city would never know that. The most dangerous person in it wasn't the Dawn sitting on top of the empire. It was the woman he loved, standing quietly in the dark, choosing exactly when to be seen. If Elena's hidden strength completely caught you off guard, hit that like button right now. We bring you stories exactly like this one every single week, full of secrets, betrayal, and women who are never as helpless as everyone assumes. Got a theory about what happens when Marcus Drazen finds out the truth? Drop it in the comments below, and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because you do not want to miss what happens next in this world.